like, why is she making a Stargate podcast? She doesn't know anything about Stargate. And it's like, well, no, I'm actually a real fan. I enjoy it. I'm just not like
Exactly.
memorizing
Hence,
everything.
hence fandom. So
Exactly. We're supposed to be like an inclusive community of people that enjoy the same thing, you know? Um, so actually, something that I think would be interesting to talk about that I think we've kind of like touched on before, and especially because it's such a prominent character development is so prominent in the show, I thought we would kind of talk about the character arc of Daniel, Daniel Jackson, which has, of course, his personal arc in the beginning of the show, his death and ascension, and then his return, and also the replacement of the Daniel character and how that kind of affected the team dynamic and what we think of that particular team dynamic. And so I thought maybe I would kind of open that up to maybe we could start with like our initial impressions of the Daniel Jackson character, at least in the beginning, and then we can kind of go from there. So,
yeah,
what were your initial kind of impressions of?
of Daniel. I really am a big fan of the nerdy version of Daniel. Like I feel like he gradually gets less nerdy as the show goes on. And there's just something about like his awkwardness when he first comes on the show. Um that I like. I don't know. And yeah, so you were asking my first impressions. I mean, my first impressions were just like I thought he was a cool character because I like how knowledgeable he was about, different things that he's researched and how that kind of adds to the SG-1 team because I mean, I know like Sam kind of has a lot of like research stuff, but it's in it from a different, category, I guess. And yeah, I don't know. I've just always really liked him. He's always been one of my favorites. I guess my SG-1 crush for a while.
Who didn't have an SG-1 crush on Daniel Jackson? Come on, let us know in the comments below if you didn't.
And yeah, I mean, I guess I was always a big fan of him. Like I always like there's just something about his character that I think is it's well rounded in terms of like he's not just like a dictionary or encyclopedia, it's like he's very very smart, but it's like he has like these like human qualities to him that make him very likable, and he's very empathetic and stuff. So I kind of feel bad for him in the beginning because I feel like um he's really trying to prove himself to be on the team, and you know um O'Neill's always kind of an ass initially to new members of SG-1 and gives them a hard time until like they prove themselves. So yeah. So that was my first impression of him. How about you?
Yeah, I mean, I feel the same. It's weird again because, as I said, I watched the show kind of out of order. So I saw some bits of Daniel before other bits of Daniel, but primarily, I mean, I would see that, okay, he's an archaeologist. He is, studying ancient cultures, and which is like one of my favorite things. And he's like super smart. So, of course, as a character that I originally really, really, really enjoyed and liked. And so, yeah, my first impressions were, wow, he's awesome.
Yeah, yeah.
It's like like if I how you think sometimes there's like career paths like, oh, if I wasn't doing what I'm doing, like I would do that, but like
Mhm.
like it would be like hobby, but it's like that's kind of like my heart is sometimes in ancient history,
Yeah, yeah.
and and um but so of course like the initial Daniel Jackson, he was very like kind of geeky. He wore glasses, he had allergies, he was socially awkward. And so there were kind of these elements of his character that definitely got transformed over time.
Yeah.
And um, something that I think is also really interesting is especially because something that I think the actor kind of brought up is the complication of the character development after sort of the main character arc. So
Mhm.
in the very beginning with Daniel, he had his wife Sharae, and in the very first episode of the series, she was taken by the Goa'uld, and then she ended up becoming a host to the Queen of Apophis, who is kind of like the main baddie for the first while. And so then it gave Daniel like a purpose to join SG-1,
True. Yeah.
and I think in the beginning, like his mission was so dedicated to that, to finding his wife, and then when he finally finds her, she's having the baby of the human baby of Apophis, because they decided to try and have a child so that it would have all the knowledge of the Goa'uld. And then he has this path of finding that child because he once again loses his wife, and then she ends up, I think being killed in the end over this
Hmm.
situation. And then he has that as sort of this goal. But then that story is also kind of tied up. I mean, I think we discussed this last time. We discussed this episode where the Harcesis comes back, which is the child, and kind of shows Daniel why he can't ever have the knowledge of the Goa'uld or his knowledge, etc. And so, like, basically, all kind of the storylines of Daniel are tied up. And so,
Yeah.
I mean, it goes through this transformation. But I guess the actor also said, Michael Shanks said he felt like the character was maybe getting a bit stagnant. And so, I mean, maybe that's also another question, like recently, I mean, I know you more recently than me, but we also have watched like seasons 4 and 5, and like what did you think of the development of Daniel Jackson until he was kind of killed in that
Yeah.
sense?
I mean, I guess like I'm assuming from an actor standpoint, like when people are actors, I would assume, they really dive deep into their characters and have things that they feel will suit that character, and how they would want to, especially if it's a series. I imagine most actors will have an idea of like how they hope for the character to kind of grow and progress as that character. But as a viewer, like, I mean, nothing stood out to me where I was like, oh yeah, that character is getting really boring. Like I felt like there was like a steady progression, and maybe part of it is just that I was used to his character, and I feel like the storylines are always so good and always progress with like everything, that I felt like each character was equally um each member of SG-1 was equally kind of growing as that character. Like I never felt like any of them, like he's certainly not the same from season 1 to season 5. Like he definitely progresses. He definitely, his character starts to have more confidence in his abilities and more knowledge with, certain things when they go to different planets, like they're learning different things. And, he became friends with an Unas.
Yeah.
um, and like, I mean, yeah, I just always found his character fun to watch. So it's like I was surprised to know that he felt that way, because I didn't as a viewer get that sense that his character was going nowhere. Um, but what I do find weird, and maybe this is kind of speaking a little bit ahead of what we're discussing, but I just don't want to forget it, is that when he did leave, I feel like then they kind of had Sam's character take over for being the one that was always talking about like, oh well, we need to get this knowledge, this is so important, we need to like study this. And like I feel like it was weird to me with her character, because while she always was also interested in that, there was, I forget what episode it was, but I remember her being like almost too obsessed with not thinking about how it was going to affect everyone, and then just saying how important it was to get this knowledge for stuff. So like I did notice that difference when they took him out, when he ascended, I guess, and was no longer in the show for a season. So I know it's getting ahead of what we're talking about, but I just didn't want to forget to mention that, because that was one thing I noticed.
Yeah, no, actually, that's a really interesting observation. And I mean, I think before kind of discussing the setup to sort of how he left, I mean, it's also interesting to talk about, um, how did the character dynamics change after he left and when there was kind of a new character introduced. And I know, so one of the things I think that was mentioned about the character of Daniel Jackson, especially in like, the season 5, is that as things kind of got, sort of more, I mean, I don't want to say more militarized, but there were a lot more storylines that had to do with militarization and this Earth infiltration of things. And I mean, of course, Stargate got more and more complex.
Mhm.
And So I think then sometimes some of those episodes that were really dealing with the cultural exploration were maybe a little bit less
Mm.
present. And so maybe that's where like you would kind of feel that way. Also, I get that there's this sense that you have this character that is, from the get-go kind of a pacifist and not really in the military, always the one that is kind of like the voice of um, empathy and hearing both sides and fairness and compassion. And they go through this situation in which, I mean, basically, if you can imagine, like the trauma that you would go through to basically have someone you love taken away from you, and then basically become someone that they're not really forced to do
Yeah.
evil things, and then have a child with someone else who is also your arch enemy, and basically be forced to do it. And then he was able to be with her, like in person, while she was pregnant because the Goa'uld was suppressed. But then that was immediately taken away because once the baby was born, she became, the Goa'uld Amunet again. And then when he finally meets her, uh, is the Goa'uld, tries to kill him, and Teal'c has to kill her. And so
Yeah.
I can't even imagine like the what that would do to you, like psychologically. That I can see where um, maybe there was a bit of a reaction to the trauma that maybe he felt like the character was missing, or that maybe the
Mm.
character
Yeah.
didn't go enough into the retaliation, because they, I mean, like he becomes more of a fighter, I think, as these things go on, but he still kind of retains that. And I don't know if maybe he felt like it should delve a little bit more as a reaction to that, or
Yeah.
something, because I think it's actually quite not horribly long after Share passes away, that there's another episode where he kind of, like with that Linnea character, he kind of has a sort of fling type thing.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of like, I guess it's a little bit, I mean, I know it's also different, like if you are, for for all intents and purposes, he probably felt like the minute she was taken by Gould, she's passed away. Like, I mean, it's
Yeah.
almost like they're not, the hope is pretty gone. It's
Yeah.
very slim. So then there's many years between. But I mean, I don't know if that's what he was referring to, or if it's more that as it became more action and military, that the role of Daniel needed to be kind of, you know, modulated. And
Mm.
I mean, I guess maybe this is also, we can kind of talk a little bit about Meridian, because in the episode where he is about to die, they and he ends up ascending, it is discussed like his path and the difficulties he has on his path and the doubts he has for himself. And I mean, maybe you can also describe your reaction to that that episode. And I mean,
Yeah.
do you also feel that that is, I mean, in a way, kind of important for the character to have gone through that?
Oh, that's a good question. You know, I don't know. I have mixed feelings about the whole thing, to be honest. Like,
Hmm.
uh, I mean, it makes sense to have that happen because then it leaves an opening for him to come back. It makes sense just storyline wise to have it that he can ascend and have that be possibility. Like, I was kind of just irritated in a way because like I hate, like, and this is just like a personal thing, it's not even probably any, like, I hate like when like people have done so much and they just like act like they've done not enough and haven't made a difference. And like I felt like that's what his character was doing, is just being like, oh well, I don't know if I can ascend because like I'm not worthy, and and
Yeah.
like just like acting like they haven't made a difference in the world. And I'm thinking, how the hell could you have done everything that like, if you're truly that character, could you have done all that stuff? You prevented like the earth from being destroyed. Like, how could you say you haven't done enough? Like, that is so
Yeah.
like the opposite of self-love. Like
Yeah.
I'm just like, that makes zero sense to me that his character would even think that. But then at the same time, it is a very human thing, I think, for many people to kind of sometimes not realize all that they do and kind of like feel like they don't do enough. So because that was the reason I bring that up is because that was part of the ascension process, wasn't it? Where
Yes.
he
Yeah.
was like needing to kind of let things go and and feel like he deserved it, basically. Um, and like could only ascend if that's what he wanted, right? I believe is kind of what happened. Um, and Yeah, sorry, I totally forgot what your question was, like what you asked about that. But yeah, that was just kind of my initial thoughts, I guess, with that is I was a little like irritated that his character would feel that way because that blows my mind that he would think he hasn't made a difference. And then when he ascended, it was kind of like a very touching moment in a sense. Like it's like, because they have it very like angelic with like how that whole process happens. And I think it's hard for me to fully know how I would feel had I not known he was coming back. I think maybe that episode would have been a lot more powerful for me to watch had I thought, oh shit, he's leaving. Like, he's
Yeah.
going. Like, I probably would have had a much bigger reaction to it. But because I've always known whenever I've seen that episode that he comes back, because when I first started watching Stargate, it's like back when you introduced me to it, I think it was in the form of DVDs. And um it shows his face on the other later
Yeah.
seasons. So he comes
Yep.
back. So I think had I not known he was coming back, I probably would have been really like heartbroken about all of that happening and kind of annoyed that like he was taken out of it. And but in terms of like the ascension, I guess I feel like it makes sense to kind of go that route. But yeah, anyways, I'll stop babbling because I'll just keep repeating myself.
No, I mean, it's really interesting that, I mean, a couple things. It's really interesting that you mentioned about that he feels like he doesn't do enough. That's a really interesting reaction because I think maybe coming from like having been so many years in academia, I 100% can see why he wouldn't think he's done enough. Like I
Oh,
could
really?
like to me this is just super normal because everybody in like academia, the more they go, like at the master's degree, you already start feel like you have no idea what you're doing. And then you do your PhD dissertation and then you realize you absolutely don't know anything you're doing and you get horrible imposter syndrome. And then you finish and then it's like technically you should be like a professional, right? Like expert in your field, at least in the thing that you're working on, but you have to continuously prove yourself because there's like only like one or two positions and then like you basically have gone through like 10 years of school and you go work for this like I don't know like university or college and then you maybe teach one class and then you get very small amount of money and you have to really continue to prove yourself in order to get a continuous job or to even get the singular class again. So and then on top of that you have to like go to conferences and publish and appear in front of people and then if the people don't agree with you and a lot of times like in academia, I mean if you are one that has ideas that are kind of at the forefront, they're not accepted. People don't
Hmm.
usually accept that. They want the things that are nice and status quo, which is kind of somehow opposite of research. And so it's to me, I completely understand like it's like imposter syndrome, except on a
Yeah.
huge level. Because
Yeah.
probably what he doesn't see is like it's like when you have like, five acceptances and 20 rejections. Like the five acceptances are what matter. And in
Hmm.
his case, it's like I saved the planet, but like he sees, oh, I didn't save Share. And so I think it kind
Yeah.
of like it blows that thing out of proportion. Like it blows the balance out of proportion. So like it's weird because when you mention it, I'm like, yeah, you're right. That makes total sense. Like how could he possibly think that? Like how could you
Yeah.
possibly think that?
Yeah.
And so it's kind of it's a very interesting observation that you made. I would love to hear from somebody. Like, if anybody in the comments, anybody listening to this, watched this originally on TV and had no idea that Daniel was coming back, I would love to know the impact. Um,
Yeah.
but I always like that episode always makes me a little sad, even though I know what's happening, just because of the way I think, again, like with character dynamics, something that I think is really well done with his sort of like, I guess, ascension death is the other characters interacting with him and like how they
Yeah.
all deal with like within his visions and then outside and the characters around him is just so powerful.
Yeah, I do feel too like the ascension, the idea of the ascension episode in general, like just like with what's happening and how they act it out and how they have it like, you know, scenes where it's like a dreamlike state of him being in his office, talking to what's her name? Oh, is it Oma?
Oma Sala, yeah.
Yeah. And the way they portray all of that and what's going on, I think also in a roundabout way makes it very comfortable for the viewer. Because if you
Hmm.
think about it, like what's actually happening in like the physical world is that he is being tortured by this, what was it? It was this, it was due to the Naquita,
It
like
was the radiation, which is, ugh.
radiation, and then like his skin was like bubbling. He felt like he was like, I think if I remember correctly, they says like he was going through torture of how he physically felt, like it was massive, massive pain. So had they chosen to have it be all about him lying in bed in this massive pain and then ascended, and but you mainly saw what was physically happening in that hospital, like, or not hospital, but like like the medic area. um I think it would be a much different feeling. Like, I think the ascension allows it to be like you can kind of accept that he's leaving the show because he seems at peace and it doesn't seem like he's suffering. But yet, if you actually think what like the members of SG-1 would have witnessed, like,
Hmm.
like, yeah, like sure Jack's character kind of has that thing happen where it's like he's communicating with him at
Hmm.
like a spiritual level or whatever. um and like I believe if I remember correctly, he was like the one to say to like let him go or whatever, which was kind of a very touching moment. Like, it's just the way they did it, I could see it feeling so different had they chose to express it differently. Like, they could have had the same thing happen where he ascends, but they could have showed it differently, that it would have been probably quite torturous to watch, is my point. Like, and you would be left feeling like horrible. Whereas because of how they chose to show that happening, it was a lot more peaceful feeling, I think.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. That's an excellent point. Like I hadn't thought of that, but you're absolutely right. That's an
Yeah.
excellent point. I mean, I think it's also, to me, it's nice because I mean, I don't wouldn't say that like in the later in season six they didn't really focus on Ascension like as a so much like, but I think it was a really nice way with all of his kind of a lot of his storylines concluding that he could leave and it could be part of the next step of his journey and it could be considered that rather than him just dying. But also, if they brought him back, um, because of what he went through, it could basically give a renewed purpose to the character, like in terms of why they're doing what they're doing and stuff, because he went through this ascension and he has not new knowledge and everything. So I thought, in that sense, it was I don't know if they like had this. There are so many things in Stargate where like when they happen, I'm like, did they think about this later on? Because this one decision that they made right now like impacted this thing later in such a brilliant way. And I don't know if they had it kind of like all planned out or if it just happened like that. But it's one
Yeah.
of those things where they actually really had some kind of thought of executing this so that it worked and
Yeah.
it like you said, it made it for a nice episode and not like a, sort of ick kind of gore episode. And it also allows this sort of new storyline to kind of emerge.
Yeah. Do you know, like, because I don't know, when he chose to leave the show, do you know if like it was always a thing where they knew he was coming back, or did they think that he was leaving for good, but kind of left it open that he could come back if he changed his mind? Like, do you know anything about the backstory of when Michael Shanks chose to leave? Like, if that was known that he would be gone for the season and then come back?
That I'm not quite sure. I don't know if it was like precisely known or if it was more like a, oh, maybe, or I mean, all I know is that like when he left, people made like websites and all kinds of like back in the, like late 90s or early 2000s style website, right? Like save Daniel, drdanieljackson.com or something, which I don't know if it
Oh,
exists anymore. But like, so I don't know if it's like because of that, they kind of asked him to come back, but then it also seems like they really left it open for him to come back. So there must have been,
yeah.
something, right?
Yeah, because
Right?
they kept having those things happen where it's like a gust of wind would go by and you would think, oh, that could be Daniel. Like, or
Yeah.
like things would happen that like they'd get helped with something, then like they'd be like, well, how did that happen? I don't know. And like, and it really was on purpose to indicate that was him. So I'm just like, was that put there because they really just didn't know? Like they thought that can totally be something that's in the episode that then
Hmm.
nothing happens from it after that point, because like you assume when someone ascends, you don't assume that they can come back, which
Yep.
which when he came back, I mean, that was quite the entrance. I thought it was really funny because I forgot that like he's just like laying there in the fetal position naked. Or at least he appeared to be naked from a distance.
So, so yeah, remember because then they call him the Naked One. That's like their name for him, the Naked One. Just kind of funny. Yeah. And I
Uh,
I did find the site, by the way. I sent it to you.
oh, did you really?
Yes, it's savedanieljackson.com, and it absolutely looks exactly like the era when it came from in terms of like what these websites
Oh my
like.
gosh.
It's like such a it's a little piece of like early 2000s lore, internet lore.
Oh my gosh.
Maybe we
That's
can
so
put
funny.
we'll
Yeah,
put
maybe
the
I could take like a screenshot or something of some of it and put it in this video.
yeah, and the
Um,
link in the because this is adorable. But yeah, so which of course then leads into that as he left, there was then a change to the character dynamic because they introduced a new character who was introduced in the same episode that well in the same it wasn't I can't remember if it was a two-parter, if it was just a single episode. It might have been a two-parter that led into it, like the first one where they met Jonas, and then you find out that Jonas was the one that kind of took a risk to try and stop everything. And so then we're introduced to this new character, Jonas Quinn. And I know we kind of just mentioned briefly in another interview with a fan our feelings on Jonas, but I thought it would be interesting too, since we've discussed so much like character dynamics and how the four interact, like what our thoughts are on like Jonas as a team member and like the dynamic within the team and like the whole
mhm.
sort of. So I mean, what were your reactions to
Yeah,
Jonas?
yeah. So honestly, actually, initially, I guess it's probably good for me to mention that when I was in the process of rewatching this, I had forgotten initially that Daniel Jackson's character leaves. Like I'd completely forgotten
Oh,
about it
really?
altogether.
Oh
And
no.
it wasn't until you had said to me by accident, like
Yeah.
spoiler, you had said to me, "Oh, well, like what part are you at?" And you're like, "Oh, well, you're gonna be sad soon." And I'm like, "Wait, what? Why?" Like, and I had forgotten. And then I was just like, "Oh my gosh, yeah, that's right. I forgot that Daniel Jackson like leaves." But I couldn't remember how he left. I thought like maybe he just got like blasted away. I don't know. I couldn't remember any of it. Like and so with Jonas Quinn, I think it's kind of like when they introduce his character, it's in that episode, right, of Meridian, right, where like they introduce Jonas Quinn and then you see little flashbacks of Daniel interacting with him, I believe. And then it isn't until then, because is Meridian the end of season 5?
I feel like Meridian might be the episode right before the end of season
Okay.
5.
Because I
So,
feel like with season 6, I don't think they actually have Jonas on the team until a few episodes in, if I remember correctly.
yes, yes,
Because
absolutely.
initially they kind of have like the amusing things of him being there, but like he's kind of just in the background and he's kind of interested in Daniel's stuff and looking through his like office area and like
Yes.
reading like the stuff that Daniel has there, and like he's just kind of getting acquainted with being on Earth basically. And then they're trying to find an SG-1 member, but like O'Neill doesn't want him on the team, and they like keep like he like doesn't want anyone else on the team, basically, I think,
Yeah.
and they have like some really weird nerdy people trying to be on the team and not being useful at all. And then it wasn't until, I'm surprised I'm remembering all this. I'm proud of myself.
Yeah, you're
Um,
amazing. You- you're reaching enlightenment. You're on the path to ascension.
because like I remember, like I think it wasn't until like O'Neill was threatened with the idea of having a Russian on his team that then he was just like, no, we'll have Jonas.
Yeah. I, I mean, now you see, now it's like, now it's easy to see how close this was to the Cold War, right? Like,
Yeah,
because, I remember always watching it. I was always like, I mean, I remember obviously I grew up with this whole, thing, but then at
dynamic.
some
Yeah,
point you feel like, that it's over. But then, in
yeah,
Stargate, it's like clearly, well, yeah, I guess, okay, he fought in that. So, I mean, that's why he's always so like, and that when the Russians come and they do have that kind of tension, but
yeah,
yet they have to like get along, but they have that
yeah.
tension.
But yeah, so basically with Jonas, I think my initial thought when I was first introduced to the character was just like, I thought he seemed interesting, but I didn't really think much about it at first. And then you don't really get to know the character until he actually joins the SG-1 team, right? Like, and I don't know. I've always really liked him, and I was always surprised that I was very easily able to like the character, because you are very sad that Daniel Jackson's character is gone. And there's just something about the character of Jonas Quinn that I think is like genius with how they have his character, because it kind of fills in the void of Daniel Jackson not being in there, but yet he's also different. And so it's not like they're trying to just copy a character and stick him in there to try and have you like him in the same way as you would like Daniel Jackson. It's completely different, I think, but yet there's some sort of similarity there with how that character is, that you kind of at least to me, you kind of gravitate towards it and like it, and you want to know more about him. And so like I like how he has um how he's very optimistic with things, and um he seems to have like an innocence to him with stuff that I like about his character. So like I again, I don't know if I would feel different had I not known that,
Yeah.
Daniel Jackson was coming back. Maybe I would have been really like, why is this guy here? Like I want Daniel Jackson back. But like, I kind of feel like I wouldn't have been that way even if I didn't know. Like, I kind of feel like I probably would be sad that Daniel Jackson's character is gone, but there's something very endearing about Jonas Quinn that like I just really like his character as well. And quite honestly, I was very sad to see him go. Like when
Hmm.
Daniel came back, it was kind of hard for me to get used to that again. Like, not that I didn't want his character back, but I wanted both of them to be there.
Yeah. And actually they had a really good dynamic. Like I think when he came
Yeah.
back, like they were, or at some point they were working together. And I thought they
Hmm.
had a really good dynamic. I can't remember
Yeah.
if it was in a later episode or if it was in the, maybe it was in the Meridian, but I thought actually they would work really nice together.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's funny because my impression is almost exactly the same. Like I thought he was very like optimistic and he had this sort of curiosity and like, and not naivety, but it was like, yeah, like this innocence
Hmm.
where, and I honestly thought that was kind of in a way like what the show needed at that point because it's like things started to get darker and darker, and especially in season 6, with like
Yeah.
Anubis coming around, like things started getting very dark, and so it's kind of nice to like have a character that offsets that. And
Yeah.
like Daniel was on this path that's almost like kind of, he has all this big mental load and he has this like, he feels like the weight of the world is on his shoulder. And so his character, the place his character was in at that moment, like maybe that did need to happen. He did need to go through this process and then
Hmm.
have, because I actually thought it brought a really interesting dynamic to the show. And um I think he also had some really cute moments with the team members and
Yeah.
also that I mean even him and Teal'c had some had some cute moments, like where, he's, I guess, sort of suggesting to Teal'c that they, kind of band together because they're, not from Earth. And, Teal'c,
Yeah.
which I'm pretty sure he was joking, he's like, are you suggesting we form an insurrection or something like that? Or like, and it's like, Jonas is so naive, and it's like, I'm thinking, oh yeah, he's probably playing with him. But I thought that was like so needed. And I mean, especially in like the lead up into, I don't, where are you at in the show actually now? Let's,
I don't fully know because I have to admit I've taken a slight break and because I'm also I'm also really into Bridgerton. I don't know if you've
oh,
ever watched.
I've never seen it. I've never
Love
seen
it.
it.
It's a bit risque, but I love the show so much. So I took a slight Stargate break and I've been watching. Well, I've watched up to where it's went up, like I'm waiting on the new episodes. But like so I had taken a little bit of a break, like whereas before I was honestly watching Stargate every day for like at least
Yeah.
one episode. And so like I believe I am in it must be season 7, maybe like partway through. I can
Wait,
actually
sorry,
pull up
but
Amazon and see like
you're not
where
in
I'm at.
season 8 yet.
No,
Okay.
no, I'm not.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. So, but I mean, actually, this is good for me because maybe I'm always thinking, you're gonna like surpass me very quickly because we're always really slow. But we're still in like kind of midway through season 2 of Atlantis, season 9 of SG-1. So we're
Oh,
pretty
okay.
we're pretty slow. We got through a few more because of the holiday week. There was a holiday weekend, but it was also a complicated holiday weekend with like family and everything. So like it ended up that there weren't so many, there was only like a couple watched, not like
Oh, okay.
a ton.
Yeah, because like I kind of like there was just something about feeling like I needed like a break. And so like I took I watched Bridgerton because I was really excited that that season came out. And then I was also had started trying to watch a show called Psych, which is on Netflix.
Ah,
And apparently there's a lot of Stargate people that make appearances in that. Because weirdly enough, me and you were just talking about this previously, like off like camera or whatever, about how when we mention things it appears, like when we mention things suddenly someone in like the Stargate
yeah.
Facebook page will suddenly start talking about the same characters we just talked about or just recorded for in the podcast. Well, weirdly enough, I just had started watching the first episode of Psych, and then it showed that there was the actor that played General Hammond. His name was there, and he was in it. And then like I was just like, what? And then like shortly after I noticed that, I noticed someone posted on the United Stargate Stargate United or United Stargate fan page on Facebook, and they said like they've been watching Psych and they showed a picture of what's the actress's name? Terrell
Rothery?
Rothery, her, and then
Oh, she was
also
also in it. Okay.
someone else that they showed like a screenshot of them in episodes. So I'm assuming, the casting directors or whoever like do
Yeah.
these shows, like they cast some of those people. So
Oh, totally.
I was curious, but I've only watched like one episode of that and saw the actor what's his name? Don
Donna Davis.
Jonas Davis, and like he was in the first episode. Um but yeah, so anyways, like that's why like I wasn't quite sure where I was in Stargate, but I was just gonna quickly look because I watch it on Amazon. I
Yeah, no.
believe okay, I'm a little further than I thought. I'm partway through season 7, episode 10, I think. But I
Okay.
honestly don't remember what I last saw, so I'll have to like refresh my memory when I start
But
rewatching.
you saw the return, I mean the main thing, so you've seen the return of Daniel, and so the part we can talk up to is the return of Daniel, and I think you've also seen like that in the beginning of season 7 they did give him some episodes that were quite like heavy on, like there was one where he was many different people, and
Yeah.
so
That's my
they,
favorite. That's like one of my favorite episodes. Like that's one has always stuck in my mind, and like I just like kept wondering when that was coming because I remembered that from way back when I first watched the show. And I remember how like that was like one of my ultimate favorite episodes because he's amazing at doing that. And like I was just like, when is that episode ever coming? And I don't even know why that happens or how that happens. And finally, finally
Yeah.
season 7.
Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, it's kind of like in a way I feel a little bit sad that Jonas left because I think I mean, even if he didn't like stay fully on SG-1, it is kind of sometimes in shows they do add, people in. And I know that, later the SG-1 you'll see there's more people, there's other casting changes that I mean we'll talk about when the time comes. Um, but it's kind of a shame that the character went completely away because I actually thought he brought something that was kind of like special at a time when
Yeah.
it was kind of
Yeah.
like needed.
Yeah.
But I really like that they put Daniel on this particular path of like this because then it's kind of similar to like how, like Sam in the very beginning, she gets taken by a Tok'ra and so many times, and I don't know if like they knew this when they did this or if it was just kind of an episode and then they ended up being able to rope this in for many things, but it's like because of that there were so many episodes that she did that happened because like she had the memories of Jolinar or because she had the remnants of being a Tok'ra. And I think what happens with Daniel is because he does make some assists and some help in especially the later half of season 6, like he comes to kind of guide Jack, and then he also is sort of watching over Tilk and Braytak in another episode
Mhm.
in a way. um and he knows he has these memories, and he kind of like it's kind of like when you remember that you remember something but you can't remember what you remembered.
Mhm.
um like he has that, and I think it kind of adds this other depth to his character that his character was in this place where in a way like all was lost because he supposedly failed at his mission, and then it's like he went and he realized there's something far more serious and great out there as a purpose, for him himself and for the character. And so I thought it was kind of nice that they kind of integrated that because then later on, I mean, it does become like useful. There are some, and I don't know if you've gotten to any season 7 episodes where because of visions Daniel has or things he remembers that something happens, but there are a couple. So
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I can't remember honestly, but I guess like the one thing I do think was kind of strange, but I guess it makes sense because it would maybe be boring if they played it up too much, but I felt like that first because that was the first episode I believe of season 7 where Daniel comes back, right? And in
Hmm.
human form and he's forgotten everything. He's like a blank slate. And that was really weird and uncomfortable, but but I mean that in a good way because you're supposed to kind of feel that because they're getting back someone that they thought they would never see again, but then that person doesn't remember anything. Um, but I kind of feel like then after that episode, it's like there was maybe one episode, if I remember, that like they still played up on the fact that he wasn't really remembering things. And then all of a sudden he was just kind of back to himself again, it felt like up to a point.
Yeah.
And granted, we never know how much time is in between or is supposed to be in between these episodes. Like they're never really clear on that, really, like if it's a lot of time or a little bit of time, if it's months, if it's weeks, if it's a few days. You don't always really know how much time is in between each episode that you see. So that could be part of it, but it's like kind of like it just kind of then goes back into the swing of him kind of acting more like himself again, and then maybe briefly mentioning to Sam that it's weird to not remember things or something like that. Like I that's just kind of what I remember of watching it. And so I found that kind of strange actually like
Yeah.
to not like have more of things that would show that he's still trying to remember who he was. Like it's just like all of a sudden came back, but maybe there was supposed to be more time in between those times than than I thought. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, it's true. I also like I have to say I've never like had the situation where I lost a memory or something, so I don't know how quick like maybe it's something that it kind of all comes flooding back. I mean, the only thing I can maybe think of as sort of a like an analog to that is like if you wake up from like anesthesia, like if you
Mhm.
wake up from, and I don't know if you've ever been put under for surgery or like, but it's like weird because there's this very brief moment when like you actually don't even know where you are, what's going on, or like if you wake up, sometimes that happens in like a very deep sleep.
Mhm.
Like if you wake up and you like kind of have no memory of anything, and then it's like, but somehow you just snap into it. And I don't know if it's something more like that.
Could
Like
be,
I don't
yeah.
know. I don't know because I've never, but I know that I've had this experience where like I've actually woken up from a deep sleep and I really didn't know who I was or where I was or anything, and like it was like this complete blankness. And then as soon as I like kind of
Oh,
woke,
weird.
then I was there. And so it was very weird. But I think the one I just had to look because I wanted to make sure it's the episode you've seen already. But the one that I was specifically thinking of where I know like he had clear kind of memories from his ascendedness that kind of then affected an episode was Orpheus. So it's the one where I think Braytek and Ryak were in slavery on another planet.
Hmm.
And because he had kind of, as an ascended being, seen that, he was
I
able to
think
kind
that's
of.
the last episode I saw, I think, or at least the last one I remember.
Okay, that was episode 4.
Oh, then I must have seen other ones. I don't know. Let's see.
Oh no,
Oh
it's
my
funny
God.
that we're talking about memories. So obviously what happened is you ascended and then you came back down to this plane of existence,
Because
right?
for some reason I very clearly remember, well, not clearly, but I remember that episode. Like it sticks out in my mind. But yeah, I think part of it is just because I haven't been watching it like consistently like I had been. And so like I'm forgetting like what happened when I left off. Like I don't remember. So I
Oh,
might just have
totally.
to go back and rewatch some of those.
But yeah, no, for sure. I think so to me, like that aspect of it, it kind of reminded me of like the Sam Carter, whenever she would have Jolinar's memories, but it's like kind of a different take on it. And then,
Yeah.
it kind of adds this whole dimension of like other beings, which is also a really nice way that they were able to set up into, as you'll see, later seasons and things. And so, um, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Can I mention something? It's not fully like where what we were talking about, but like I was curious, like your thoughts on the season when Jonas was in it. I know that's kind of going back, but I found like because that was season 6, right?
Hmm.
And I found like it to be like because I was wanting to mention this when you were saying how it was nice that Jonas had kind of like a lightness to his character and stuff because of things being so heavy. And I kind of felt like season 6 in particular to me had a whole different vibe to it. Like I felt like there was so many like heavy topics going on that like for me personally when I watch things like I love all watching all different genres of stuff, but if I watch things that consistently have like very serious stuff going on, it takes a toll on me and I have to like take a break and just watch something funny or whatever. That's just kind of how I am as a viewer. And I remember when watching that season just feeling like, wow, like these are really good, but all these things are happening and it just feels really dark and it's constant like stuff. That it was refreshing with how he was in it because sometimes that would bring a little bit of lightness to the situation. But I do remember, I think it was like a good portion into the season before they finally had like an episode that was just like very lighthearted. And I can't, think of which one that was. Like I can't remember, like I just remember the feeling of like everything feeling like it was building, 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 and me being like, oh my gosh, this is all getting quite intense. And then like having like one episode where it's like, okay, I can breathe because it's just kind of like silly or not this big storyline. But I was curious if you felt that, like, or when you watch things, do you get affected by stuff like that or not? I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny with Stargate or things like that, not so much, like with fantasy things. With other shows, like I mean, and I did find like season 6, I think overall it has a little bit of a darker undertone. I think is
Mhm.
what, and in season 7, I think they kind of bring back like some like there's some kind of humorous episodes. I can't really say them because I don't know if you've seen them yet. But there's some funny ones, and then in season 8 there's like a whole other element because there's some, I mean, as you'll see, there's some Teal'c character development and some goofy episodes there. And so and I think they kind of, especially as they get, I understand, like on the one hand, television is changing at this time. And
Mhm.
so things overall, like all shows, I think get a little bit more dramatic. So I think in comparison to like other TV, like this is very like mellow, but I think like it starts to get dark. I
Mhm.
do think it helps they pull it back. And I think especially like some of the themes are more, I mean, not heavy, but like, they're more like they have more impact
Mhm.
um, overall, and some more episodes impact other episodes. And so I think that kind of, happens. I mean, obviously, Anubis is a much different villain than Apophis, Apophis is kind of like ridiculous and over the top and everything. But at the same time, there is some goofy stuff that happens and some more other episodes. I do think season 6 was a bit darker overall.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
somehow they had some. I think also maybe that was when they switched, like where it was broadcast, and there was maybe also something in the cinematography that made it a little bit, and maybe because when they bring Daniel back and they had to like kind of bring in more ascension themes, and they start like they want to put more towards his character, so they start bringing in more of this like anthropological, archaeological stuff that was maybe less present in the 6th season.
Mm.
Because without that character, maybe they had to focus on other topics like the Earth related stuff and other things that were maybe darker. That's also a
Yeah.
possibility.
Yeah.
Maybe that's part of it. But yeah, no, for me, like the things I can't watch at all is anything where there's like some kind of like a sad ending or like some kind of psychological thing or anything like that. Like I could never watch Fight Club. I can never watch like City of Angels. I can never watch like 28 Days Later. Like I actually can't. Like cannot watch it. So like
Oh,
if
okay.
like I really can't. Like anything that is like that is super heavy and no. But
Yeah.
yeah, I mean this is like fine. It's like I think like okay, when I think okay, season 6, like the spookiest thing, I think of the one when they're in that town in like Oregon actually. Oh, just like where
Were
they're in
they
like
in
the
Oregon?
well, I think it's actually filmed, of course, like in somewhere in BC, but they're like technically in Oregon, like that's where they say it is in the coast of
Oh, where
Oregon.
the whole town gets like taken over by gold, basically.
Yeah, I think this kind of thing, this is where you get into the darkest,
Hmm.
part and the scariest parts. But yeah, I mean, I guess in season 7, everything is more focused on the lost city and everything, which is kind of leading into, the next
Yeah.
step. So
Yeah. Do you feel like um because the actor Michael Shanks really wanted an improvement in his character with the types of things that they were writing for that character, do you think that's why kind of like they in the especially in the beginning of season 7 so far of what I've seen, like they always have things happen to him, like it's like, when he becomes all like the like you were talking about the one with all the different personalities and like,
yeah,
basically he has all these consciousnesses, is that even a word,
yeah, yeah.
in
Consciousnesses
like
shouldn't
in
be.
him, and like, and which that I would probably say that is like my ultimate favorite of all time,
Mhm.
just because I'm very impressed with
That he
like
can do that,
how
right?
he does that, where you truly feel like he's each one of those different characters, and it never once feels like he's putting it on. Like you feel like you're believing like what you're seeing. Like it's amazing to me that like
Yeah,
that to
it's
me is shows
really
such
amazing.
wonderful acting. Like I was just like, wow. Like so that's very impressive to me. And so like but I can't remember like other things, but I think even before that there was like other things that would happen to his character. And since I haven't like prepared myself at all today by re-looking up things to remind myself, I can't remember what that was. But like I just noticed that. So like do you think like that's why they had it there, was to kind of almost appease the actor, or it was just more of like that's kind of what got him back, was because like they were telling him, well, we'll have the character grow to be like this and we're going to have these things happen. Like I was just curious your thoughts on that, or if you felt like it was just kind of put in there to kind of like strictly from an actor's like perspective of being able to feel like challenged and like their characters doing something more than just the typical.
I mean, it's a good question. I could see it being partially that. I could also see it being fan service, because people are basically begging for Daniel to come back, and then the producer's going,
Ah,
all right, let's give him Daniel. Let's give him so much Daniel, too much Daniel to handle, or something like that. Yeah. But I mean, what I think would be really interesting is when you get to the later seasons, because there's kind of I think we will have to do it after we're both done, because there's a further character development of Daniel and other relationships that he is in that I think or not in, but like people he interacts with and character dynamics he has that I think would
yeah,
be worth exploring and retouching on when we both get to that point. Because I mean, I'm partially there, but not all the way there.
yeah. Yeah, something that's kind of sticking in my mind, and I know again, it's totally going off topic of what we plan on talking about. Like it has absolutely nothing to do with Daniel Jackson whatsoever, but it's just sticking in my mind, so I have to say. So hopefully you don't mind me just mentioning this. But
Please.
like, but one thing that I found really weird is with Samantha Carter's character, there's the episode where she does that race with the alien species that are like doing a race, and like she's helping him like trying to win the race. And the way they start off that episode is by showing her like as if she's just been called in from like her normal life, right? She's not wearing her uniform, and she has on like this like biker jacket. She has her helmet as if she's just been like riding a motorcycle and is all like badass out of nowhere. And then like she's like super hyper about the thought of like racing, and suddenly she's like this adrenaline junkie. And I'm just like, where did that come from? Like this whole time she's been very composed, very like all about like all these like, sciency things of like researching stuff and staying at work all the time and always being in her costume, to suddenly like out of nowhere, like badass Carter comes in like on her motorcycle and like has her hair like different and like just seems different. And I'm just like, and it's just for that one episode.
Oh, that's so funny because it's weird because to me, like, I guess it didn't occur to me that that's different because I think of like, I don't know, in my mind, like when I think of people that are really into this kind of like electronics and gadgets and everything, maybe I just know too many engineers or like I know of too many engineers, like they all have motorcycles.
Oh, really?
And they definitely do tinker with things that you know, like something like, like, oh, working on a ship and like flying it, like tinkering on it. Yeah, sounds like fun.
Well, I
So,
could, yeah.
I mean, like now that you mention it, I'm like, okay, yeah, like I could see like where does that come from? But like also, I don't know if maybe I just kind of, filled in too many gaps of like knowing too many people like that either are engineers or are in training to be engineers and kind of
Yeah.
that personality type.
Well, I
But
guess because I think, oh, sorry, I think I cut you off.
no, 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 go on, because then I was just gonna, yeah,
What
go
I
on.
was gonna say is like, I guess like the reason why it struck my brain in that way is because whenever you see her outside of like the headquarters, like in like for example like earlier seasons when they show her at her house and that one alien followed her back to her house and everything, whatever season that was, they always show her driving a car. They never show her driving a motorcycle, and everything feels very like subdued and chilled and relaxed with her whole like house environment and what she's driving. And so they don't give off this like thrill seeker vibe. And then I feel like then in that one episode to then suddenly have it be like I thought like they were gonna have it be that she maybe met some guy that was like into motorcycles and
Yeah.
she had just been with him or something, and that's why she was all like acting weird.
Oh
Because
my
like
God, that's funny.
even like who was it? Was it Daniel? Or yeah, I think it was
Hmm.
Daniel that was like questioning her like why she was so hyped up. And it just kind of reminds me of like, I don't know, like I guess everyone has different aspects to their personality, and you can get really hyped up and excited about something that you just look like you look crazy. You got the crazy eye, and like I felt like she had the crazy eye, and she was like weirdly hyper, and like I had like never like seen that before, which I thought was cute. Like I thought that was cool to see
Yeah,
that side of her
totally.
character, but it was just a surprise because I felt like having it like maybe it wouldn't have felt so strange if they didn't change her physical appearance so much in the beginning with like the motorcycle thing.
Ah, yeah.
Like to me that felt very like purposely done to make her seem like she suddenly has this like wild side, let's go fly around on a ship and go super fast. But at the same time you think of her career and it makes sense, but like it's just
No,
they've never shown her like that before. So that's why I was kind of like, whoa, what's
true.
happening?
Yeah. I mean, maybe we should open that up to the audience and ask, like, what did you think of that moment? And
Yeah.
did it come out a surprise for you? And yeah, and I guess we can also ask then, what are your thoughts on Daniel Jackson and his development? And what are your thoughts on Jonas? Was he a suitable replacement? Were you sad to see him go? Were you happy to see him go?